Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies and TV. And welcome to our third official or fourth episode of Discovering Star Trek, where we are talking about one of two Star Trek shows that are on TV now, because the Orville, I think, is Star Trek 2 at this point. But we're talking about episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery, Context is for Kings. I am Scott, and with me is
Mike.
And new to the front row is...
And this is Blake.
Okay, Blake, as a newcomer, we ask people the same question every time, which makes absolutely no sense when we're talking TV, but we'll do it anyway. What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Let's see on that one. Probably terrible answer because it's a terrible movie, but it's just fun to watch. And I'm going to go with the old Super Mario Brothers movie because it's just so bad, it's funny.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's one of those movies that I'm just saying it's just that bad that it's just fun to have a group of friends over and just make fun of the stupid thing.
Okay. I've heard many an answer on this one by now, and that is definitely the most interesting. One of these days, I'll do it.
I just like leaving you speechless, Scott.
You do it all the time, boss. But one of these days, I'll do a flashback on Super Mario Brothers, and I will have you on it just because I want to hear what you have to say. So, we are here again, as I mentioned, discussing episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery, which, if you are not a subscriber to CBS All Access or not understanding what torrents are, you have not seen yet. In fact, the torrent probably isn't even up yet. But we are going to be rolling through this episode, giving our first impressions and what we feel about it, and also what we didn't like about it. First off, I do want to go around the horn here, especially since Blake is new to the conversation, and kind of get our feedback on how we felt the TV show was going so far in terms of episode 1 and episode 2 before we dive into episode 3. So we'll go with Blake first because we haven't heard from you. What are you thinking about Star Trek Discovery before episode 3?
So thinking before episode 3 is it felt a lot like episode 1 and 2 were setting up the backstory. And it really, I know a lot of the previews said there was going to be a second pilot, and I kind of think that was hopefully what we were heading for. And I think it got off a lot better than some Star Trek series did, but definitely has some ground to make up, in my opinion.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, we've previously discussed, because I've been on the last 2 episodes, but I'm a big fan of the direction that this is going so far. Kind of the same thing Blake said. We obviously talked about a number of the cons in this series. Not the cons, but the, negative
no con
pros,
yet, although...
the anti-pros, in terms of some just weaker plot points and the overall fact that they chose to do a prequel instead of a new story. But this is shaping up to be a new story. So, but overall, going into this, I was very pleased. The first 2 episodes felt very much like a cohesive story that, as Blake said, set up the backstory. So I was eager going into tonight to see what the show's really going to be about.
Cool. So episode 3, I'll give a brief synopsis, but I'm assuming everyone's watched it, so I won't be too much, is we are 6 months after the first 2 episodes. Michael is a prisoner who still wears a Star Trek Delta, or Starfleet Delta, which I don't understand, but she's wearing one. And on her way to a dilithium mine that just wiped out 50 other people at the dilithium mine, they are picked up by Discovery by not coincidence, but they feel coincidence after a shuttle mishap. We find out very soon that Discovery is a science vessel, but has been kind of reworked to handle the war, which is also a hot war at this point. At least 8,000 people have died since the Shinzu met the Klingons at the Binary Stars 6 months ago. And throughout the episode, we find out that Discovery is working on some interesting science experiments, and their sister ship, the Glenn, is in the same experiment world and decides that they run into a problem that causes the entire crew to be wiped out, and some kind of strange dog to appear on the ship.
Event Horizon.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's it in a nutshell. We end the episode.
I had that same thought, by the way.
It's a good movie. We end the episode with Michael joining the crew of Discovery, and that finding out that Lorca is working on some other weird science experiments, along with what I would describe as a quantum drive, which is kind of funny because, as I mentioned, there's another Star Trek show on TV right now that's using quantum drives. So take that as you will. So let's do with first impressions. Mike, we'll go to you first. How are you feeling after this episode? We'll go into more detail about the episode itself in a minute, but how are you feeling after watching it?
Still good. Was really pleased with the introduction of some of the new characters, the reintegration of characters from the first two episodes, the general setup. After this episode, like I said, we get a sense of what the show is really going to be about, and I think it's cool and interesting. There were some things about it, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that I don't know what other way to say it. There were kind of like allusions, throwbacks, homages to, we'll say, some other sci-fi that I thought was kind of but I don't know. Then I look back at some other sci-fi series, and they all kind of have that similar thing. So I won't harp on it right now. But overall, good. I think this was an exciting episode going in, and it's an exciting episode coming out for me. So
Blake, what about you?
Yeah, I liked it too. I think it kind of picks up the story, says what the series is going to be about going forward. I agree there were definitely some homages, perhaps some other sci-fi that I'm not sure fit real well with the Star Trek series. But overall, though, I think the episode is moving the story forward. I think it's a good episode, and hopefully they continue with that. There were some issues with it, which I think we'll probably get to. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know how to feel. The episode itself, okay, in a bottle, I agree with you guys. It was a good episode. There's some interesting things going on. There was definitely some interesting new characters. My concern is, and I think I'm going to just have to deal with this concern, is they're doing the mystery box a lot, which is something that J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof do a lot, and that is give you some plot points but don't tell you what the hell is going on, and you have to discover it with the characters in the show, which is okay if it's done well. But my concern, this is going to turn into something like Lost, where okay, we have all these little pieces that we're finding out about this crew, and are we ever actually going to get any payoff? And I hope we do, but I'm kind of concerned by that. And
well, let's hope there's not a writer's strike, and let's hope they have the entire show actually plotted out this time.
Well, and that's the one thing that this show has going for it, is it's one season. There may be a season 2, but they have all said, the new showrunners and the previous showrunners have said that this is going to be a story for the season, and then if we come back for season 2, it may be the same crew, it may not, but it will be a different story. So I'm hoping that kind of forces them to do things. But when I'm watching some of this stuff and I see all these little Easter eggs and stuff and just kind of questionable, weird stuff, it worries me a little bit. But I also wish they would turn the lights on the Discovery a little bit too. I'm getting kind of tired of it being dark. And I think part of that is it's not helping that the other science fiction show on right now, Orville, is very much TNG looking, so everything is very bright. So I just got done watching episode 3 of that, and then I turn around and watch this, and I can't see what the hell the dog even looks like that's on the Glen because it's too dark to see. But that's I'm kind of worried that it's not Star Trek. But hopefully it'll prove me wrong as we go forward. I like the episode, but it's just the theming is starting to wear on me a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, we did talk about that before too, which is the fact that this is the least Star Trek feeling Star Trek that we've Star Trekked, kind of on purpose. I mean, it's a new show for a new era, and this is what people are looking for these days.
Yeah. Damn millennials messing up with my Star Trek.
They're avocado Star Trek. set phasers to toast.
Oh, God. Okay, let's move right along into what we did like about the episode. We'll go to Blake first. What are some things that you liked about the episode? And in case you haven't watched the episode, I forgot to mention this. We are going to spoil the hell out of this, obviously. So just fair warning.
Too late.
So
I forgot to say it.
Let's say one of the things I liked about it, and you've kind of touched on it already a bit, is DS9 is probably one of my favorite series, especially the last couple seasons where it did get dark. And I didn't think you could go much darker, and Discovery's giving it a run for its money. But I do like that feel of it. I mean, I think it's a grittier Star Trek, so I'm definitely liking that feel with it. With the story, I definitely liked Lorca, especially when you kind of get the feel at the end that he is definitely not telling you what the hell's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah, I like Lorca because I still think he's a bad guy, obviously.
Mhm.
I think sooner or later he's going to do a turn that's going to require Michael and Saru and others to just take him out. But I like the fact that he's actually a likable guy. The little fortune cookie thing and just having those little ticks is fun. And I don't know what's up with his eyes, but obviously he's done some other experimentation. But the other thing with Lorca I like is that he's a smart guy who's building his team for whatever he wants to do, and we're still not entirely sure what he wants to do. But when Discovery pops out of warp and the shuttle is almost on its running out of energy because of the Firefly eating energy things, I was like, really, Discovery just happens to be there? But no, as we learn, Lorca's building his team the way he wants it, so he probably grabs Saru for the same reason. He grabs somebody who is, and connected.
And on that note, Lorca did not want that shuttlecraft pilot.
No, okay. As much as I said this is a dark show, I do love the dark humor. It's okay. The pilot's okay. The pilot's got us, and she goes flying off in the nowhere.
Yeah, I kept thinking like, okay, Discovery popped out, rescued everybody. That like the prisoners would be getting off the shuttle, and that pilot would be like, in a huddle on the floor, like breathing hard, like, oh man, that was close. Nope, dead, just dead.
I laughed my ass off when that scene happened. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, I agree with the Lorca thing. And as much as I was just complaining about the mystery box piece, I do like the fact that Lorca's definitely got some stuff behind the scenes going. I mentioned it to you guys before we started. He's got a little playroom. I noticed a Gorn skeleton or skin of some sort. He obviously has a Tribble, and now he has a dog. But he's got other stuff in that playroom too that I haven't figured out yet, but I'm sure everyone will freeze frame it and figure it out. Blake, what else did you have that you liked?
So the other part, I like kind of the way they're setting up some of the characters. I think Saru, definitely some of the commentary between him and Michael is going to set up that the choices he's probably going to have to make at some point in this series. So I think they're saying that, but I'm kind of liking how they're building the story with the serialized nature. I think that's one thing this has going for it as far as a strength. Mm-hmm. So building that up, building the characters up. I think this is going to be one of the first Star Trek series we're actually going to get to see character development early rather than later.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned in our last episode, Saru I really like, and I like the dynamic they put him in now to where he still knows that Michael's a good asset to have, as he says, but now he also knows that she could go rogue on him at any minute, and he has to play with that too. Mike, what are some things you like?
I touched on a few of these already, but yeah, the character development continues to be really strong. Like I said, I was super glad to see Saru back, but I knew he was going to be, but he's a character I also really liked. And again, the interactions between characters has been really, really nice to see. It's not flat. It feels, natural and interesting. I did really enjoy the character of Lorca. I was looking forward to seeing Jason Isaacs in this show because he's, as an actor, I like him, even though I don't tend to find things that I like him in, if that makes sense. But
so he's a bad agent, basically.
Yeah, I think the shows are the weaker point of his career, but his acting is great, and I love his character portrayal. And in this, he was really an interesting guy. As you said, he's obviously seems to be very smart, very cunning, a little bit mysterious. I kind of surmise from the whole context of Discovery and his, as you're calling it, the playroom, that he probably is a scientist of some kind in his own right, being the captain of the science vessel, but he's also obviously a bad bad guy who's going to do what he wants to do. And lots of other characters are alluding to the fact that, well, what Lorca wants, Lorca gets one way or the other. And your own free will is moot.
Yeah, Anthony Rapp's character, who I'm blanking on his name at the moment, basically calls him a warlord. There's obviously some of the crew doesn't like him because it's only been 6 months since the war started, and it sounds like a lot of these crew members got gobbled up by the Federation, Starfleet when this war happened. So they haven't been a crew for long. And so, I can see that quite a bit.
But other than that, again, the whole character or the whole plot setup, I think, is really interesting. I kind of like that they what do they call it? They hang. There's a Hollywood term for like they hang the lamp on it or something like that, where it's like Michael basically says, "Here's your deal. I'm gonna call it out right here, lay it all on the table," and he's like, "Ha ha ha! No, that isn't what's going on." Even though it might kind of be what's going on.
Yeah, he's got some. Well, and Saru said it too. There's like 300, and it has the ship has the ability to do 320 some odd science experiments at all given times. So just because the quantum firefly fungus things are what he's showing her, it's not everything they're doing on that ship.
Oh no, they're totally trying to burn tribbles for fuel.
Well,
this is my prediction.
If you caught with it too, they even asked about it, the Black Starfleet insignia.
Yes.
I almost wonder if that's not going to our friends from DS9.
Yep.
And Section 31 is going to somehow pop up in this thing.
We know Section 30 runs around because it was part of the Federation Charter. So I would not doubt that at all. And that would explain a lot of what's going on in terms of the Black Ops and everything else. And and that's another thing that I hope the story brings me through it, but obviously the work that's going on here is not what Starfleet should be doing. And I think Section 31 would definitely help with that kind of discussion a bit too. So was that your main points, Mike? Did you have any other ones?
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty much it as far as the positives go.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as all of you. In terms of the other characters, as I mentioned already, I really like Saru. We don't get too much out of him, but what we do, I think Doug Jones is just great when he's behind makeup like that. He plays it well. Depending on the scene, Tilly is going to be one of those who's either going to annoy the hell out of me or be kind of fun. I do like the fact that they're doing the below the decks thing, which we talked about, Mike, in our introductory episode. So we have a cadet who obviously is not ready for prime time, but she's going to be there anyway. I just hope she doesn't get too irritating too quick. And Anthony Rapp's character, again, I'm blanking on his name, and that's terrible, but
Stamets, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I like Anthony Rapp as an actor, and I think the character is going to be interesting because we've already kind of played him or seen him play as kind of the scientist first. He does not want to be there. He'd rather just be in the lab, and also his friend or what have you is now dead, so I think that's going to piss him off too. But I hope he doesn't give too many more speeches because that speech was pretty dry. But yeah, so that's the things I agree with you most on all those, and some of the things I was okay with. So let's move on to things we didn't like about this episode, and we'll go to Blake first.
So one of the big things I didn't like, and after looking at the first one, especially, the CGI with the space scenes and the ships and everything, I don't know why, just the quality of the graphics, like the first flyby on Discovery, didn't look that great to me. So I had some issues with some of the CGI. I mean, I was a big fan of Babylon 5, and honestly, it looked like I was watching some of that old CGI at parts. I had some issues with the look of it. And I think it's got a little bit of a pacing issue still. I think it needs to work on its pacing just a bit. As far as moving, how fast it's moving.
And going to the Discovery, I have not minced words on this. I think Discovery is ugly as sin. And they did update it from the Comic-Con trailer. Obviously, it's got some different look to it. The warp nacelles are less clunky looking, but I don't understand what Starfleet engineer would ever put those little pylons in between two saucer sections, because if I'm a Klingon or anyone else, I'm going to aim for those 4 little pylons and cut the bridge off and call it a day. And I don't like the look of Discovery. I do like the fact that they have flat out said this is a science vessel. It's a fresh fleet ship. So it is looking more like a transition from what the Shenzhou is, which, as we saw in episode 2, is an older ship. Even when 7 years ago, when Michael joined the crew, she pointed out that the Shenzhou was pretty old. So we're moving towards what will become a Constitution-class ship. But again, the Constitution-class ships are already out there. We're 10 years before TOS.
I've got some other thoughts on that ship design, actually.
Please.
I mean, I'm just trying to rationalize what I see, because I'll agree real quick with Blake. I thought the CGI was a little bit. I didn't think it was Babylon 5 bad, but I did. It was a little jarring at times to look at. It wasn't what you expected to see with, like, Battlestar Galactica or something that has been on recently. Actually, the Discovery's design didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. And maybe that's, they made some subtle tweaks, and I think maybe I've just come to accept that this is just what it is a little bit. The point I wanted to throw out there was, and I'm going to mangle the name if I even attempt it here. I thought there was an interesting thing about the ship design, which was the bridge section is, as you say, it's kind of in the middle of the saucer, but the saucer is like this weird disconnected ring. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of is interesting, and maybe a play on the fact that if you looked at the the other science vessels that we've seen throughout TNG, or I don't know if there were any in DS9, but they didn't have saucers. They had that big spherical, like
an Oberth class, or not Oberth, yes. Olympic class, I think is what it was.
Something like that. I wasn't going to try. Daedalus, I think, was one.
Daedalus was,
So I kind of thought, okay, Discovery being named a science vessel, it's interesting that maybe that kind of spherical center with the bridge on it is a play on that.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, I'm thinking too that with the level of dangerous experiments going on aboard the ship, potentially, that the idea is that maybe those experiments take place in the ring, and it's a sort of, if something goes wrong, pop those 4 pylons, dump that ring, and get out of there. So I'm, again, trying to rationalize things that I don't really care for about the design, but I do see maybe some intent.
Well, and I know if you go, that design is kind of based, if you've seen any of the designs from what was going to be Star Trek Phase 2.
Yep.
That ship is pulled straight from the designs of that. Yeah. And the reason back then that they did it was, Star Wars was popular, and it was the same designer that did the Star Destroyer that did that design. McQuarrie, I think, was his name.
Yes, it was.
Yep.
And, you've got Star Wars coming back, so it's almost like they dug up that old design and said, hey, let's try to just fit right in.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, is the showrunners, and I can't remember what article it was in because I've read too many articles about this show now. The showrunners have said the other thing to keep in mind, this is a science vessel, so it's not made for long-term exploration. So unlike the Constitution class or the Galaxy class, this is not meant to go on a 5-year mission. It's supposed to go out, do its experiments, and go back to space dock or whatever. So it will be interesting to see how the war will affect that, and the fact that this ship was not made to be a warship. And as we saw in the trailers for episode 2 or episode 4, it's going to be dealing with firefights. So we'll see if it can handle a lot. We do know the Glenn can get blown up with like 3 torpedoes, so it doesn't look too promising.
Yeah, 3 torpedoes, shields down, lightly armored.
I guess it did take out a Galaxy class in Generations too. But
there you go.
Yeah. But a couple things. Actually, yeah. Okay. So Mike, you had yours. Blake, you had yours, right? For didn't like.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So a couple more things just for me is, and for this one, I didn't know if I was going to put it in the I liked it or I didn't like it column. So I'll throw in the I didn't like it, but I do like the fact this is going hard sci-fi, and the fact that we're talking about basically string theory and quantum physics. I do appreciate that a lot, because Star Trek really, as much as they do technobabble, they never actually try to explain the technobabble. And in this case, they're actually trying to explain it. What I don't like is, because this is a prequel again, and I would not have this complaint if this was a year after Voyager or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We know that whatever kind of quantum drive they're putting together that they can basically operate at anywhere at any time doesn't work, and it's not going to work, because if it did, somebody in the 100 and plus years of Star Trek history that we know is coming would have used it. And so that annoys me that because it's a prequel, all of this stuff doesn't really matter.
Feels a little bit like the Khan using a transporter briefcase to go to Kronos.
It's exactly the same thing. And probably what happened was Kurtzman, because Kurtzman wrote that shot. I'm trying to be...
You want me to give us the explicit rating again by telling you my feelings on Kurtzman?
Discovery is definitely the first TV show Star Trek to say shit, because she says shit in the Jeffries tube.
Also, I'm pretty sure the first one to see somebody turned into a pretzel. So
that was awesome. That's not on my don't like list. The fact that they melted the people, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And a Klingon telling them to be quiet was kind of awesome too. And more dark humor. Did he just shish you? But so no, I mean, all this stuff that is like something new. If this show, and I'm going to sound like Craig, because Craig's been complaining about this too offline. If this show was in the future of Trek, it would be perfect. Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. Warp drive is kind of old news. Transwarp doesn't do too much more. So let's start talking quantum. And that would be perfect. But because this show is 10 years before TOS that has, the ability to basically go warp 5, and that's about it, this makes no sense to me, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. It is right off the bat. They're nailing that the pitfall of being a prequel, which is this would have been a cool story later, and now it just is already sort of mucking up the timeline. And I'm afraid that they're going to account for it by the end of this season. They're going to have to explain it away. They've made a point of saying they're going to do that to try to bridge the gap, and it worries me. It worries me what they're going to have to do, or if they really will.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, they keep saying it's the prime timeline, but when they get asked by interviewers a little bit more detail, or ask for a little bit more detail, they get kind of like, well, it's the prime timeline, but we're telling our own story. And okay, well, you can't have one without the other. If you're going to follow continuity, follow continuity. You're not
going to find out that this is what spawned the Abrams timeline, or that this somehow is responsible for spawning the mirror universe.
Yeah, I can see potentially the mirror universe. I know it's not going to be Abrams timeline, because as I think I mentioned in one of the episodes previous, Paramount owns that, and CBS is not Paramount. So when Viacom split, they can't use the Abrams verse. They're using some stuff from it, like lens flare, but that is its own thing. Paramount owns that. So CBS has rights to all the TV shows, and so that's why I think they're going to mainly stick with the Prime universe on that. But I obviously Abrams' universe is going to tie into this because it's the most popular thing up until now. So they're going to try to milk it for all it's worth. But yeah, so that's one of my big complaints is I like the science of it, but the science is concerning me just because where we are in the timeline. Another thing that I have a concern about is the fact that we are going full on war footing with this thing. And we're going to have Klingons obviously in every single episode at this point, because the Klingons have showed up even for a few seconds here. And I wonder how good of storytelling they can do when everything has to tie back to that war. I mean, I'm with Blake. Deep Space Nine is my favorite series, so I like a serialized story, but at least even with Deep Space Nine, there was times where they branched off and did something that wasn't Dominion. And I don't know if this show can do that, so that's kind of concerning to me too.
Well, yeah, I think it's that pacing issue Blake mentioned. I think they've got a pretty limited... They've got a big story that I think they maybe want to tell, but they have a limited number of episodes to get it all done. And while I appreciate that they're going to make the effort to do it so that, when this CBS All Access idea turns out to be horrible and season 2 never happens, we'll get a complete story. But... Well,
yeah, and I was looking at the ratings on this guy. Obviously, ratings don't matter anymore. And CBS All Access, even though you would think they would have to tell their shareholders numbers, they don't. And Netflix never does either. So we're never going to know how many subscribers signed on. What CBS did tell us is the night that Discovery aired, it was their biggest sign-on night ever for subscriptions, and it was their biggest month on record was September. Of course, that could have been 10 subscriptions. It could have been 10 million. They're not going to tell you. The one thing we do know for fact is Nielsen ratings came out, and with the +3, which is 3 days after premiere, so you can count the DVR viewings, 10.6 million people saw the first episode of Star Trek Discovery. That is pretty damn good for a Sunday night with no lead-in from football. And in fact, I keep mentioning it, Orville had a lead-in with football and scored 10.6 million viewers on the Sunday it premiered. So Orville and Discovery had the same amount of viewers. Orville premiered one Sunday prior, or 2 Sundays prior. So CBS saw in that first showing that 10 million people are interested. Now, how many of those people went over to CBS All Access, we don't know.
I think part of that's going to hinge too. Netflix basically paid for the production.
Yes.
For international. So as long as Netflix is happy and footing the bill, so that's going to be the other key on this: is how long does Netflix foot the bill?
Yeah, and I was reading an article that Kurtzman was interviewed a couple days ago, and they asked him about season 2, and he said, from what he has heard, CBS is happy with how this is going, but they have not been greenlight for a season 2. One of the things that a lot of production companies do is right before a movie or a TV show comes out, to make some more hype, is they say, we've already signed it for another sequel or another season. CBS hasn't done that yet. I would think after 3 episodes, if it was as big of a hit as CBS would want it to be, that they would say, we're going to go for season 2, hoping that would get more people to watch season 1, but they haven't done that yet.
Well, and the question, I guess, is, do they think Netflix, are they holding out to try and get Netflix to cover the bill for season 2?
Could be.
Because Netflix doesn't work that fast in a lot of cases, especially not here lately where they've been canceling series, which we've talked about before. But yeah, I mean, it kind of makes me wonder what the future of this holds as far as this series being paid for by one company and produced by another. And, are they going to have a tug of war there, or if Netflix decides they're done paying the bill, will CBS choose to continue it on their own? And if they do, what kind of budget's it going to get?
Because
a lot could happen.
And I agree with you. The CGI wasn't the prettiest in this thing, but this is obviously they didn't go cheap on the budget for this show. Yeah. And so I'm Blake, you're completely right. Netflix paid for basically everything that we're seeing in season 1. And the rumor has been that because CBS delayed almost a year, Netflix already was not happy because they wanted a show in January and they got a show in September. They're also not happy that they're having to play CBS's game of not dropping all at once, because this is completely against what Netflix usually does with their shows. So they're having to stream it out, and they don't like that either, because then it's bumping up against their other shows that they want to drop in different months. So I don't know. I mean, I think if Netflix sees a bump in subscriptions, I can definitely see them saying, okay, we'll pay for season 2, but
there's another interesting point is with Netflix, again, possibly covering the bill and possibly CBS wanting them to continue doing so. When Netflix drops a whole season of a show, they can watch to see immediately how many people watch it all the way through.
Yep.
And that is not something CBS is going to allow them to do, which is going to lead to very possibly them negotiating more, being more cautious about giving the green light for season 2.
Yeah, and CBS, I swear, is shooting themselves in the foot, because not only are they trickling this thing out week by week, they're going to put a break November and December because they're still operating after that freaking idea of sweeps weeks and everything, which there is no Nielsen ratings anymore, kids. You don't have to worry about seasons and all that. But they're going to take a break, and so we're going to have almost 8 to 10 weeks of no new shows, which I think is also going to annoy the hell out of Netflix too.
Oh, it's going to annoy the hell out of people that want to finish watching Discovery. I mean, the big question here isn't going to be about how many people signed on to watch episode 1 or episode 2, given that changed platforms. It's going to be how many people are still here at episode 12.
Well, what they may be looking at with that gap, though, is people who are hesitant to sign up right now on, an untested series for the most part.
Yep.
They hit that break. Someone can spend that, 30-day free trial that you can get, or 7-day free trial, whatever they're offering at the time, binge watch all the episodes to date. I think they're bent on how many people they can get to sign up after that break.
Yeah, and I think the same thing, too, at the end of the season. How many people are going to sign up in March or April when this thing is done and then binge all 15 episodes? And then I think so. You're right. I think CBS is going to be looking at obviously the September numbers, but they're going to look at the January numbers or whenever that break is, and they're also going to look at the end too. But again, that does not fit Netflix's model because Netflix is sitting here for 6 months not knowing if they have a hit or not. So I that's why I would love to see Netflix come on and say we're good for a season 2. Here's CBS. Here's a dump truck of money. Have fun. But I don't see Netflix doing that, especially after they made the deal with CBS. Disney came in and ripped the rug out from under them too. So Netflix is going to have another competitor in the market by 2019 in terms of Disney. So Netflix is going to have to circle the wagons more so than give CBS extra money for a show that's not theirs.
Hell, yeah. I mean, and if anything, Netflix is going to want to be able to show the show themselves. You know, they're going to lose a bunch of content here real soon. So
if I'm a Netflix CEO, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe if CBS fails, we can just get the rights. We'll do it ourselves.
I already paid for it.
Yeah, we'll just pay for the rights and do our own show.
Yeah.
We know it works. We don't know what CBS is doing, but we know it works.
You know, and the other thing about this too is if every season is truly a separate kind of independent storyline, then there's not so much pressure from the next Walking Dead season 2 to come out the following year. They may be comfortable taking a longer break.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing that Kurtzman, I think, said, or maybe it was Akiva. I forgot his last name now, but the other executive producer. I'm terrible with names tonight, but he said we don't expect, even if there is a season 2, don't expect it in 2018. We expect it in 2019, which makes kind of sense because they're right now as we speak, they're filming episode 15, the season finale, or series finale for that matter. So we shouldn't expect to see anything after season 1 in 2018. So there's going to be a delay no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's just concerning to me that CBS hasn't doubled down on this thing already, because with a 10.6 million viewed first episode, that's not bad, especially for sci-fi. Enterprise never even came close to that. Of course, that was on UPN and syndication, but still, never even came close. So Discovery was doing well.
I kind of wonder if there's any wiggle room in whatever deal they struck with Netflix that they would reconsider showing season 1 on TV next year or something.
You know, I mean, that could be a thing too. If CBS is seeing that this all access stuff isn't working out for them, which I know they're doubling down on it, they really want this to work. But if they're seeing that they can get better advertiser rates than they are getting subscription rates, maybe that's the case. Maybe they throw it in the summer and see what happens.
Yeah, this whole thing, this whole dual company deal and multi-platform deal is really weird in this, isn't it? It just opens up a lot of possibility for, in my mind, it opens up a lot of possibility for turmoil.
Yeah, well, and I think that's CBS got greedy when they started this whole idea, and I think they're going to pay for it one way or the other, and I'm just hoping we don't pay for it, because I'm with you guys. I'm liking the show. I want this show to continue, at least give me something past 15 episodes, because I want Star Trek on TV or not on TV, on my TV, because I'm casting it to my TV. So it's nice to have. But I think the other thing, too, is when Enterprise failed, and I've said it before, I liked Enterprise, but when it failed, it took us another decade to get Star Trek back on TV. If this thing fails, we may not get another shot. So I really want this thing to succeed.
Well, it looks like the Beastie Boys might have sank the new movie franchise. So,
I think Kurtzman and Orky. Kurtzman and Orky.
I'm gonna mute my.
Yeah.
Mike's laughing now. Great.
I would agree with that one. Between JJ Revenge of the Remake and Kurtzman and Orky, the movie franchise. I'm not sure where that's headed.
I think it's done, unfortunately. And you know what? Again, I said this already on a couple of different podcasts. I liked Beyond. It was my favorite of the 3 because Abrams, Kurtzman, and Orky were not involved at all.
Yeah, it was my favorite of the 3, although I will go on record as saying it still doesn't mean that I was in love with it.
But, I think...
Beastie Boys.
Okay, so we're going to do 2 more things here. One is we're going to rate this episode, and then we're going to do some predictions moving forward. And I think we our predictions are going to be a little bit more solid now because we've actually had our second pilot and we know the Discovery and its crew. In fact, I do want to point out, I think it was you, it may have been Kevin, but I think it was you who was talking about the super weapon, and you definitely hit that on the head because that's obviously what they're working on. But so we'll go ahead and rate this sucker first. And what we do with our TV show reviews is we rate them on a 1 to 10 scale, and it is being compared to other episodes in the franchise. So a 10 would be one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time. 5 would be an average Star Trek episode. A 1 would be Threshold or Cat's Paw or what have you. So we'll go with the new guy first. Blake, go ahead and rate episode 3, Context is for Kings.
I'm going to put it at about a 6. I mean, I think it was a solid episode, a good one. There are definitely far worse, TNG season 1 and 2, for example. So I'll go for a 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you got for?
I'm going to go higher. I really want to give this like a. I mean, I'm willing to almost go to a 9. I mean, I said it in the beginning. I left this episode really excited. I'm pretty. Despite the kind of glaring technology continuity issue, like I'm pretty stoked about what this series could do going forward. So I'm up there.
Yeah, and for me, I'm gonna go right around where Blake is. I don't think it's an average episode. I think it is above average. But I gave Vulcan Hello, I think, an 8, and I gave Battle of the Binary Stars a 7. And I'm gonna go one lower on this and say 6.
That's interesting.
I think it's above average episode. My concern truly isn't really the episode itself; it's where this episode's taking everything else. But I also I think there was some duds in there. I think Anthony Rapp's little soliloquy on the shuttle was a little bit overblown. I get what he was trying to say, but I think just the dialogue was a little rough. And I really want them to turn the frickin' lights on so I can see what the hell's going on. I guess I'm just getting old, but and I'm not entirely sure if I'm okay with Michael right before she's about ready to get eaten by a dog to start quoting Alice in Wonderland. I think that was a little bit over. I think that was a little bit on the nose, just a bit.
That was a bit strange.
But it is cute that we found out that she did read Alice in Wonderland with Amanda and either Spock or Sybok. She said her son, so we don't know which one.
Did she not say that it was? Did she not say it was another human?
She said Amanda and her were the only humans, because Amanda's a human. Okay. Yeah. So, and she said her son, so I'm guessing it was Spock because Sybok wasn't Amanda's son. We do know that Amanda's going to be on the show, by the way. It was announced, I think, today that Mia Kirshner is playing Amanda, who she's mainly known for The L Word and 24 season 1 and 2. So I've seen her on a couple of different things. She's a good actress, but so Amanda is coming sooner or later, which means we'll have more Sarek, too. So yeah, I give it a 6. So let's go ahead and do some predictions right now based on what we have seen and what we think is going to happen for the rest of the season, which again is going to be 15 episodes. We're 3 episodes in. Blake, where do you see Discovery going from here?
I think where I see it going a lot is Burnham figuring out exactly what Lorca's up to. And I think that she's going to have to be challenged for that with people on the crew questioning her and her motives, given her backstory now. So I think that's really going to be around her kind of exposing what's going on and then what the others, how quickly they come to terms and what they do with it is kind of going to be the story. I definitely think we're dealing with a weapon of mass destruction type, storyline. And that is where they're going to head with it. And I think we're going to get a lot more into seeing just how screwed up that Lorca really is. I think the one thing I'm interested to see what they do with it, though, is, they've hyped a bit around this that, the engineer Stamets is supposed to be the first openly gay character in Star Trek with a partner on screen. So I'm curious to see how they work that into this whole storyline and do it, because it seems like a really dark story to have that type of a setup, but we'll see.
Well, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit. Did we already see his partner, and is that partner dead now? Because the way they were having just kind of that banter, it seemed like they had a pretty strong relationship, and he mentioned that they were friends for a long time. They didn't flat out say that they were, lovers, but it seemed like if they were going to go down that route, that could be really well. Obviously, jade the character even more that their experiments killed his partner, but I don't know if that's his partner or not.
And see, they've said in the preview it's supposed to be a medical officer on the ship, but
oh, okay, I didn't catch that, so then maybe I'm completely wrong.
But they've told us so many other things. Who knows?
I will say that when he was having the conversation with the other scientists on the Glen, I did appreciate that instead of having the full hologram, which I already complained about, what they had going with kind of the holographic head would be something that would be more I could deal with in continuity, just because it's like obviously we're 50 years ahead of where 66 Star Trek was, but it's still not like overblown.
Yeah, but like every so often the attraction to like 3D pops back up for a couple of years, and then everybody decides it's stupid and it goes away.
Yeah.
So
I remember when I was a kid, McDonald's was giving out 3D glasses so you could see Hondo with John Wayne in 3D on TV. So it definitely comes and goes.
Yeah.
See, kids, it used to be TV was big enough to where McDonald's could do tie-ins. Now, not anymore. Now we have CBS All Access. So, okay, Mike, what kind of predictions do you have?
Yeah, I don't think mine are really changing. I think the series is ultimately going to come to be about the crew of the Discovery, kind of having to look at their captain and decide whether they think he's morally doing the right thing or not. I think this show might. I'll tell you what I want it to do. I want it to come down to a question for the viewer, which is, do you think that what Lorca is doing is morally correct or not? I don't want them to paint him as a super evil Sith Lord, ultra villain that everybody just has to stop. I think it needs to be a morally gray area that's left to you to decide.
Yeah,
I really hope that happens.
I hope you're right too. I think they're potentially doing that for us in a way, because they're already starting to tell us about the toll of the war, and the fact that 8,000 some odd people have already died. So they're trying to tell us this war is getting terrible. Obviously, 8,000 people isn't really big on a galactic scale, but we're getting there. The one thing I would just add to both of yours, I obviously think Lorca is going to be the main linchpin on we're going to have to deal with this guy. But I'm also starting to think that this is going to go past Discovery itself and the crew trying to figure this out. I think sooner or later it's going to be all of Starfleet having to figure out what to do with Discovery itself, and the crew having to deal with that at the same time. Because the other thing, too, is Lorca mentioned that the Glen was bouncing all around the Beta Quadrant. And for those who are not completely nerds like myself and the guys here on the podcast, Beta Quadrant is mainly Klingon and Romulan space, whereas an Alpha Quadrant is mainly Federation space for the most part. Federation kind of mingles in the Beta Quadrant a little bit. But the whole point is, if they start bouncing back and forth with this quantum drive, they're going to start pissing off a lot of people. And I can see potentially Starfleet thinking that they've gone rogue and having to take them down too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys if you picked up on any of the Easter eggs as far as like where Michael briefly got a glimpse of, because they called out a couple of different planet names that I didn't recognize. They did mention the Romulan homeworld or something once. There were definitely a few that I felt like I was maybe supposed to recognize, but I didn't.
Not going to lie, my 1-year-old was screaming during that scene, so I didn't hear all the names. I heard Pandorica or something, which is either an Avatar reference or a Doctor Who reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blake, you alive?
Yeah, so the audio is breaking up on my end.
Yeah, it's Mike kind of freaks out every once in a while. Yeah, it's like every time we get to 45 minutes, your mic's like, I'm going to poop now.
The one thing that, just to remind, watching that scene with her in the box, I can't remember the title of it, but there was a Next Gen episode that kind of had that with the ancient technology.
Yeah.
And it was, what was it, the Iconians?
Yes, yeah.
Where they kind of had that instant you could be anywhere, anytime, any place type technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's got some interesting callbacks and some possibilities.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of those, and that could be a very interesting way that they could take this. Is you had the Iconians, which is, I think they actually started out in TOS. There was some mention of them, and they were really fleshed out in TNG. But then you also have the Preservers, which is a race that was well before any of the main races that we have in Star Trek time. The Preservers were there to preserve even older tech, and I'm blanking on what the name of the other the race was, but the one that TNG in a pretty weird, actually, it was kind of a Ferengi-centered episode, dealt with the idea that all the races, for the most part in the galaxy, were seeded by another race previous.
Oh yeah, that one. In My Image, I think, was the episode on that one.
Yeah, and it was the whole idea was they were trying to explain why everyone just had weird foreheads in Star Trek, and it was that everyone is from the same genetic code. So there's definitely some areas that they can go with that, some advanced tech, and I think that'd be interesting. I mean, there is some advanced stuff already out there. We know from TOS if they're bringing back Harry Mudd, they could easily bring back the Guardian on the Edge of Forever or the Doomsday Machine or any of that advanced tech they could probably talk about. I think we're going to see some of that just because, again, Lorca's got his little menagerie of weird shit in his room. So I can see them kind of seeking out, pun intended, new tech as well.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I am honestly hoping we don't see Borg at any point during this.
Oh, God.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll make the addendum again to my my speculation about the shows. I think besides Lorca being we know that he's the bad guy, so I think he's a bit of a scientist himself, and I think he's getting people all whipped up with this very noble sounding goal of inventing the new way to fly, in the name of discovery. But then he's that's part A of his plan. And we're going to find out where part B goes.
Well, I think part A comes from the fact that he was damaged in some way. I mean, they didn't say why his eyes don't work, but I doubt it was just because a science experiment went wrong. I think he has a beef with people.
Yeah, it could be, or it could be a beef with the Klingons. Did they say it was a science experiment that went wrong?
No, I'm saying I doubt it's just that. I think something happened because he references that it's an old war wound or something like that.
Well, and I think there's something to the fact that he apparently takes an affront to the notion of having his eyes replaced.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be all human, all original.
Well, they're definitely playing him. I mean, Isaacs is a British actor, but he's got the Southern accent. He's playing up the whole, my heritage kind of went away when we found peace. We couldn't be capitalist anymore and sell our fortune cookies. Yep. So I can see him thinking that, much like some of the other villains we've dealt with in Star Trek past, is maybe this utopian society isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Well, maybe he's a bit more like the Klingons than the rest of Starfleet wants to be.
Well, before we wrap this thing up, guys, do you have anything else that you want to mention or talk about that we haven't talked about?
The opening scene with the tractor beam and the shuttlecraft reminded me of Close Encounters.
They definitely were trying to do a beauty shot with Discovery, and as you already mentioned, I don't know that they pulled it off.
Yeah, it was real weird.
Yeah, but that's what they were definitely like, here's our ship. Have fun.
Yeah.
Like,
it was supposed to be an
said,
aha moment.
Try it again.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add, Blake?
I think it was mentioned earlier, I think a little bit, and you'd mentioned, the Close Encounters. I think my feeling was, especially when they got into the Glen, was a little bit Event Horizon-ish.
Yes.
Event Horizon / Alien.
Yeah, yes. Event Horizon / meets Alien.
When I was watching this with my wife, she said when they saw the claws in the hall, what are we watching, an Alien movie now? Like, we are. But yeah, so the other thing is I guess shuttlecraft can go into warp now, which
who knew?
For TOS area. I mean, yeah, I guess whatever. That's me being a continuity bastard again. But yeah, so that will wrap it up for our discussion of episode 3. We will be back here Sunday night live once again for episode 4. And then this will be put on the podcast feed Monday morning. So if you want the audio version, You can check it out every Monday if you want the live video version because we have such beautiful faces. You can catch us Sunday nights around 9:30 or whenever we get to check out the episode. You can always find the Front Row Movie Reviews at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com, or you can email us at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. Please, wherever you're watching this, either YouTube or your podcast app of choice, be sure to give us a rating and a like. And a subscribe so we can continue to build our audience. This was the largest debut for a new show that we have had last week with the first 2 episodes. So I'm very excited to see how this is going. And judging by the number of viewers who have kind of come and gone as we've been doing this live show, it looks like there's still a lot of interest for talking about Star Trek. So I'm looking forward to finishing up the remainder of the next 12 episodes with all of you for the next 6 months. So I want to thank Blake for joining us for the first time. We'll definitely have you on again, and Mike, as always, for joining us as well. And until next time, I'm Scott, and we will see you in the front row or on the couch or whatever our tagline is now. And until next time, live long and prosper, and peace and long life.
Black alert.
Black alert, black alert, black alert.